Welcome to Truth and Justice with Vivian King. I am your host, Vivian King, and I have another exciting topic for you tonight. We're going to talk about grand juries. You know that that is a secret proceeding in which people are indicted with felony cases. So tonight we're going to talk about the secrecy of the process, how a case is actually indicted, which the official term is true billed, how a case is no billed, which means dismissed, and just the general procedure, the difference between state prosecution and federal. And I'll also throw in a little bit about the juvenile system. But I want to introduce my guest tonight. My first guest is Dwight Boykins. He's been a grand juror 4 times. He's a local business owner and just a very well-known person in Houston. So Dwight is one of my guests tonight. Thank you, Dwight, for agreeing to be here. And then I have MariaElena Castellanos. And I might have messed her name up, but I'll let her say it again. She's a very experienced criminal defense lawyer. She's been a criminal defense lawyer for 30 years. She's had many cases no billed, but she's going to talk to us about a couple of the cases she's had no billed to facilitate the questions and the telephone calls. And as always, I invite you to call in to ask your questions about the topic that we're talking about, grand juries. I'll also throw in a little bit about the Andrew Blomberg case. You know, he was found not guilty. He's a Houston police officer, and his case went through the indictment process. And so, but he did have 2 cases. One was no billed. That means that the case was dismissed before it ever got to trial, and that was the civil rights violation that he was charged with. The second case, he was charged with official oppression. That case was indicted by the grand jury, in which they issued an indictment in which he went to trial and was found not guilty today. So we'll interweave his case in a little bit as to how the process works. Keep in mind that everything that Dwight Boykins talks about is hypothetical, the hypothetical case. We are not going to talk about any cases specifically. It's secret. He's never shared those cases with me, and I've known him over 30 years. But we're talking about just the process, all right? And so I want to start off with you, Dwight, and just tell us how you were selected to be on a grand jury.
The grand jury process consists of what they refer to as like a panel of individuals. The criminal court judges select, and they review the applications. You apply online, and they review the applications, and they make selections based on several criteria. One is that you have to be able to commit to 2 days a week for 3 months to serve. And they can go from 6 hours to 8 to 10 hours per day. A lot of people don't realize that that's a major commitment to this process. So that's sort of how it worked. This, you know, I served under 4 different judges, and it's been one of the best experiences I've ever encountered. And I've had an opportunity to talk to several college kids, high school kids, about what the grand jury is about, why it's important, and most importantly, Vivian, that every citizen should commit time, make time to serve. I'm a very busy man, but I make time to serve. It's important.
Tell me about how many cases you run through in your 3-month period or your daily
A lot
basis.
of people would, I'm glad you asked that question. A lot of people really have no idea how many and the volume of cases come through a grand jury court. Proceeding, I'm sorry, we typically see about 6,000 to 7,000 cases during that period. I was a foreman on 2 grand jurors, and sometimes the foreman can determine the pace of each case. So between 6,000 to 7,000 cases.
In a 3-month period?
In a 3-month period.
That's a lot of cases.
That's a lot of cases.
And all felonies have to be indicted. So in Harris County, what officers, like, say they see a drug transaction, or they chase a burglar, or they chase a robber, they will arrest first and indict later. And all felonies are required under our Constitution to be indicted within 90 days. So there is a quick pace of the prosecutors to bring these cases before a grand jury, such as the one that Dwight's been on.
Yes.
Dwight, are you aware of how many grand juries are sitting concurrently at the same time?
For the most part, about 3.
Okay.
Yeah, for the most part, 3, if I'm not mistaken, because you really don't know, because you're only in year 1. And truth be told, the only time you really get to interact with others is during a coffee break.
Right. Well, there are usually 3, so
Yeah.
you are right about that. Explain the process as you know it. So just tell us how a case is presented to you.
typically a prosecutor will come in and, well, let me start over. Each grand jury is assigned a prosecutor. And they will come in and lay out a total number of cases we will see that day that will be presented. And it can be one prosecutor or 10, depending. And if it's a high-profile case, a lot of times we don't know it until they come in and lay it out. But you sort of pick up on it when you see one or two cases for that entire day. So they will come in and lay out the cases. And most of the times, when they typically have 100% evidence, you kind of get familiar with the different layouts of the cases. If they presented a small drug case, and I mean possession, and the guy admitted to it, I mean, you don't have to have the police video camera when you have 20 of those, and you know they're, you know, small quantity, and I mean you sort of understand and get a clear picture of what that case would be about, and you make a decision probably a little bit quicker than one that brings in a grand jury packet when the prosecutor lay out more evidence about what happened. But then 90% of, maybe 95% of prosecutors will also say, well, they should at 100%, to be honest with you, Vivian, say we have a package from the defense. Okay, they should do that. Sometimes you'll catch them say, oh, I forgot. When people like myself and others will ask the question, where's their defense package? Oh, I forgot. And so you have to deal with that. I'm not saying that's across the board. Then they allow you an opportunity to read it and ask questions to it. And we typically spend a lot of time doing that.
Now, let me tell you, like, ask you this, like if I submit a grand jury packet, because the defense lawyers cannot go in to a grand jury proceeding. It's secret, the prosecutor and the grand jurors. So I have to rely on the integrity of the prosecutor to present that packet to you, but I always make 13 copies.
Yes.
12 for the grand jurors and 1 for the prosecutor. Does everybody typically get a packet?
Absolutely, yes. Okay. We go through it, and the prosecutor, no. Once they present the package, they just pretty much, you know, just become invisible. They allow us to go through the process, write down questions. The foreman typically determine or direct the time frame and how long it takes. If it's a thin packet, we tend to, you know, get through it pretty quick. But if it's thick, a lot of evidence attached, we tend to, you know, not rush and hurry the process and allow people to, because you get great. What I love about the grand jury, Vivian, is that you have, you know, basic common citizens in Harris County. You very seldom get a lawyer, police officer, or those kind of folks. So these are just people who want to know, want a safe environment, a fair judicial process taking place. And we can talk more about my opinion on that selection process, but so we're not swayed. The prosecutor can come in and have some influence in terms of our decision. But for the most part, when we start dialogue, and we ask them to step out.
Well, don't you notice that there's a lot of probable cause that's the same? Like, yes. For example, this guy was driving on the sidewalk where there's walking where there's no sidewalk, or he stopped him and the car smelled like marijuana. And so that gave them the probable cause to search the car, and then they found marijuana. Don't you find over and over again the same probable cause?
No comment.
I mean, and the reason why I say that is because...
It's funny you said I'm joking about the no comment. Yes, you're absolutely correct. And you wonder how many people walk around with the same...
facts scenario with all the different
it's
people.
It's interesting, yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, when I was a prosecutor from 92 to 95, I just thought it was unbelievable that half the police reports read the same. And I had a police officer who's now deceased tell me that it was a drop-down menu.
Really?
Yeah, he told me, you know, just like in a lot of jobs where you pick a probable cause, one that fits. And so that means that the fact scenario is different. So, because most young people who might have marijuana on them are not smoking it down the street. So it's not smelling like burnt cigarettes. Yeah. And it's always interesting to me that the police never say they found burning marijuana. They just, it smelled like marijuana, so I went through the car. And there might be some joint somewhere on the ground. Well, that doesn't smell like anything.
Absolutely.
And so, but the probable cause always seems to read the same.
And if I may respond to your experience, may I call you Mr. Boykins? Or,
you are more than welcome.
And that is, and with all due respect, you know, to how you've seen the grand jury process from the 4 times you sat on a grand jury. From my 30 years of experience as a defense lawyer, I have been apparently living in a different universe. Number one, I have never once been invited by a prosecutor to submit a packet of information. I have never once been invited by a prosecutor to present my witnesses. I had to literally scratch, fight, to dig out brand new evidence, and then with that brand new evidence, in the form of testimony, in the form of videotape, convince the prosecutor that I should be allowed to present at least a packet, and in some cases, both the packet and the defense defendants.
And I think that's what Dwight Boykins is alluding to, is not that it's invited, because he doesn't know how the packet gets to the prosecutor. In fact, didn't you just say that sometimes you have to ask them, is there a packet?
Yeah.
So we do have to rely on the integrity of the prosecutor. What we have to do is either write them a letter or tell them, hold this from the grand jury, give us some time to put something together, because we just got hired yesterday, and we know that on a specific, say like if your court date is May 30th, and we go to court today, May 16th, well, I just got hired today, so I'm just looking at the police report for the first time, and it goes to the grand jury in between court dates.
Yep.
And so we don't know when that's going to happen, so we have to rely on them to hold it from the grand jury and give us a date specific to present our defense in writing. And a lot of times when defendants want to talk before a grand jury, the prosecutors will come out and tell us that, well, the grand jury didn't want to hear from us. So tell me how that happens when our client is sitting out there in the hallway waiting to talk for hours because you're going through 300 cases.
Let me tell you, there are a lot of great judges. Judge Vivian King one day, hopefully, but there are a lot of great judges in our county. One in particular I can give credit to. She made it very clear, once you're selected to serve, then the others leave the courtroom, and the 12 that are there, this one particular judge made it very clear that if a defendant is sitting in the lobby, she couldn't mandate it. She just said, I would advise you guys to at least, if they take the time to come out, to listen to them. I'm really sad to hear what you just said, because that's not a good thing.
Yes.
It's really not a good thing.
It's not a good thing. You would think that prosecutors would invite very clear exculpatory evidence right from the get-go. But my experience has been, especially where a complaining witness is a police officer himself, or where the complaining witness is a security guard or somehow connected to law enforcement, for some reason or another, it's almost a foregone conclusion that this is going to bring down an indictment, and regardless of how clear the evidence, the exculpatory evidence is in the case. And
let me stop you right there, because remember, my audience is everyday people, and exculpatory, they don't know what that means.
Well,
I don't know what that means.
Exculpatory means, hold on just a moment. Exculpatory means something that makes you less blameworthy.
Yeah.
It's not quite your fault, and so that's the defense side. But let's go into what a hypothetical, not a hypothetical, but a case that you had, so you can share with the viewers from a defense standpoint, when you read a police report and then you interview your client and investigate, and you have to do this rapidly, how you put a packet together and try to say it in everyday terms, please.
Well, in this first situation that I'm going to describe, there were 7 high school teenagers who were defendants. They were accused by the local gang leader in that high school of having come into the gang leader's house and having assaulted his father and himself. And I call it the case of Scarface plus a bad cop versus the Magnificent Seven. And the reason I say that is because this particular gang leader, whom I refer to as Scarface, had a long history of dope dealing, assault, robbery. In fact, he had been in the juvenile, the youth commission for felony. His brother had committed murder. His brother was in the penitentiary. And there were even videos of, this is the complaining witness now, this is one of the key witnesses of the prosecutor who tried to bring these indictments against these 7, what I refer to as the Magnificent Seven, because they were really good high school kids. In fact, one of them was the senior class president, and he had dreams that year of getting scholarships and going to college to become a doctor. Now, I had to do all of the investigation. that should
Tell
have
us
been
what they
done.
were charged with, please.
They were charged with burglary of a habitat with intent to commit assault and with bodily assault.
And how was the manner and means? What would the police, the prosecutor be reading to the grand jury that these 7 boys did?
Well, the prosecutor essentially was dealing with a bogus police report that was assembled by the HISD, the Houston Independent School District policeman assigned to that high school campus. And that policeman, again, there's some real questions as to whether or not that policeman had some monetary motivation for putting this bogus affidavit together. And it was the policeman who signed the affidavit, not the gang leader. Anyway, essentially what it said was that there was an assemblage of high school students, about 40, who had gone to the gangbangers' house, and that they were assembled outside and over a controversy between the gangbanger and the new boyfriend of his ex-girlfriend. And essentially what happened was somebody went from that sidewalk in front of that house, through the gate, entered the house, and assaulted the father and the gangbanger, and then left the scene. Now, there were 40 high school students there. These 7 of these of the people present included the defendants. However, I was able to conduct a very thorough investigation, and I had to give up my client's right to a speedy trial in that particular situation. You know, and of course, counselor, you know there are very rare situations where you really see the absolute importance of presenting this information to the grand jury because of the devastation that a felony indictment can have on a young person's life. And so that's why I extended it to almost the full 6 months. And in the last week that the grand jury was meeting, I turned up a videotape of the actual encounter of these 40 students outside the gangbangers' house. And that videotape showed that my 7 defendants, my clients, did not enter that house.
And so did you so you got still photographs from this videotape?
Yes, I broke it down into still photos, and in addition to that, each of my clients, there were 3 of them who were in felony district court because they were 17 years and 18 years old, and then there were 4 of them who were in juvenile court. And I also, each individual teenager, I had each of them put together their own packet, their
of what kind of information?
Oh, it included their school record. I mean, their grades, their teachers. Even some of them had kindergarten teachers or elementary school teachers talk about their character. None of them had any, with the exception of one. There was a juvenile who had a prior possession of a small trace of marijuana, but the rest of them had no criminal encounters, no criminal violations whatsoever on their record. But their employers, employment experience, I mean, these are hard-working, blue-collar Latino students, and wonderful, self-disciplined, loving young people.
Now, from what you're saying, Dwight, if you're on a grand jury, hypothetically, what would you take to that to make your decision? Let me, first of all, let me just sort of bring some insight of what happens also from a grand jury perspective when a videotape, in the example you gave, is presented. 9 times out of 10, and most of the time, I would say 100% of the time, a prosecutor or assistant DA will come in and present it. The defense attorney may think that they're coming in to try to indict, present the evidence to get the case indicted. But when they have evidence, concrete evidence like a video or pictures, they will come in and say, look, this is the charge, but here's a video. I don't think we could make it. I don't think this, I can't tell you how to vote on this, but it's going to be very difficult for this to win in a petit jury because of this. Would you like to see the video, like in your case? And those kind of things sort of let every prosecutor will not come in and say, regardless of the situation, you know, I don't, you know, blah, blah, blah happened, and I think this person is guilty, which they really don't say, but lean in that direction. If the evidence is clear to that prosecutor, they typically come in, and that's probably what happened in your case, and I'm not certain about that, with your 4 defendants. The video probably played a major role in the grand jury's decision.
So in that situation, you wouldn't be so concerned about how good they were in high school,
No.
but it would more be just the evidence and the facts of the case. Did they break into the house, or did they not break? Did they stay on that sidewalk?
Yeah, because you're right. That's a good question, Vivian, because the prosecutor, now, again, I don't know if you're saying that the video came right before the grand jury proceeding, before it was presented?
She got to present it.
Yes.
And the still photos she got extracted
So
from
the prosecutor
Right.
presented everything?
Yes.
At the same time, yeah.
But the thing is, I had the week before the grand jury met, as soon as I was able to get access to that video, I immediately
got it to the DA's office.
Took a copy to the DA's office. But then the DA told me, she looked at it, it's only a few minutes long, and she said, this doesn't show anything. It just shows a bunch of people, and look, somebody went through that fence. And I said, well, obviously you had to break it down into still photos. She says, well, I'm not going to do that. She says, as far as I'm concerned, there's just a bunch of kids there, and they're just as guilty as they, you know, as before.
Well, let me say this, and Miss Castellanos, you, I mean, that was a situation that, again, you're an attorney, and I'm not. I haven't experienced that in the grand jury office. They typically, and I'm not saying I'm pro or anti the prosecutor, let's be clear. They typically work, I haven't had that or heard of that experience in terms of evidence. They typically present it to the grand jury and let us know, because they know, I'm not a lawyer, Vivian, but are they in violation if a defense lawyer want to present something to the grand jury of evidence and they choose not to?
It is an ethical violation. Prosecutors obviously have prosecutorial immunity, like all government, like police officers, unless they deviate outside of the process.
Okay.
So they should do it. There are packets, I think, that sometimes don't make it, like you say. But you know, how would we ever know? So we have to rely on their integrity, because you know, y'all can't talk about it as grand jurors. The prosecutors don't talk about it, so we have to rely on their integrity. But it's my experience that when I give a packet, I believe that the prosecutors are presenting it. And when I was a prosecutor many moons ago, I would present them.
And that's the way it's been. And like I said, I don't know about your case, but I can tell you this. Every prosecutor that I've had an interaction with, if they had a defense packet, they presented it. And I can't think of one, because I'm very aggressive in there, in terms of the prosecutor showing both sides of the coin and making certain that they don't just come in. I'm going to ask direct questions, make certain that they don't just assume they can come in and get a true or no bill. We want to know exactly what the facts are. And I asked the question, you know, depending on the case, you can kind of gauge it. You know, was there a packet? And they'll say yes or no. And if a defendant is outside in the hallway, they will come in.
Let me tell you this, another case that you see a lot of packets on are sexual assault cases. Don't you find that?
Absolutely.
A lot of sexual assault cases. People want to fight that inside the grand jury process if they can. Now, Dwight, one of the standards of review in a regular trial, after a case is indicted and we go to trial, just like Andrew Blumberg, the cop who just got a not guilty today, the jury is deciding if he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, okay? There's no reasonable doubt at all, which I find to be odd, but that's the way it was decided. And of course, that's a different controversy in and of itself with a white officer and an all-white jury. However,
was it?
Oh, it's all-white jury, yes. And so and in my experience, that becomes a problem. Just that, not necessarily that it's racially motivated, but if.
Vivian, can I ask you a question? This is what I have a question to the audience on this. Can you tell me how many times you've been given a jury subpoena and you looked for every reason not to serve? This is the problem we have in our community.
It's the problem in the black and Hispanic
community. That's the problem we have in our community.
It is.
Everybody look for a reason to go to the grocery store, to go to school. I can't do this. And the first time something like this happened,
they're mad. But they
mad.
Or if
now,
they're
I
in
did
trouble,
not know it was an all-white jury.
Or if they're in trouble, they wonder why is it that I want some black people on my jury. And my first question is always, do you go to jury duty when it's time for you to go? But hold on. Let me just say one thing that I wanted to say. No, we're going to get on that.
But there's a distinction between jury duty and grand jury service. And I think that's an important distinction to draw right here. And that is the grand jury is selected by the judges.
Yeah. Right.
They're not selected at random at all. And I think that's a very important, and the fact that these grand jury proceedings are carried out completely in secret, I think those two elements already stack the grand juries with good old boys.
But we do have a proceeding that Dwight was talking about earlier that you can go online and register to be a grand juror. And you couldn't do that before. That's a newer procedure, and they ask people to volunteer to do that now that a lot of things are done online. Judges definitely have to go out and get people, but people can volunteer, and there have been efforts for people to volunteer to get a more multicultural grand jury, and that's how Dwight's here.
Right.
And so it is not as stagnant. But one of the things I wanted to make the distinction of is if you're going to trial with a jury, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. But however, the standard of review is different before a grand jury.
Right.
It's more probable than not. So if the prosecutor comes in and says that the police officer stopped him speeding, smelled the odor of marijuana, searched the car, found a brick of cocaine, and now he's facing a first-degree felony, 5 to 99 or 15 to 99 years. The question before the grand jury is it more probable than not that it happened like that? That means about 51% maybe it did happen, 49% it didn't, and 51% if you think it might be happened, then you indict, or the official word is true bill, so that person can go back to court and fight it in court and still could win the case, still could be found not guilty. Because in the case of Andrew Blumberg, the police officer, it was 4 of them, Andrew Blumberg, Drew Reisner, Raid Hassan, and Phil Bryan. They were all true billed or indicted for official oppression. But yet, so that means the grand jury felt that there was more probable than not, 51%, that they maybe did it, so they should stand for charges and be indicted. But then when they go to trial, the jurors didn't see what they saw on the tape, and they said that he did not violate this young man's civil rights.
Well, I assume the charge was assault.
No, it wasn't. This officer was charged with 2 different things: a violation of the young man's civil rights, in which he was no-billed. So that case was thrown out. Then he was charged with official oppression, and official oppression is where a police officer uses their color of law, they use their position, their uniform, to do something illegal or violate somebody's rights, or to violate a prisoner's rights by beating them up. It's against the law for a cop to beat up somebody who's already in custody.
And Counselor, you've brought up an important point, and that is the charges that were actually presented to the grand jury in the case of these police officers who on videotape were beating the crap out of this 15-year-old unarmed African-American youth. And that is, it causes the public to wonder, well, heck, you know, what are grand jury proceedings about anyway if they're going to be fair? Why weren't felony assault with intent to kill? I mean, if you look at that videotape, anybody with 2 eyeballs in his head can tell. They were kicking him in the gut. They were kicking him and beating him on the back, around his spine and his head. I mean, it's a wonder. I don't know what his physical damages were, but there were these. This was clearly, from what my eyeballs told me, felony assault with intent to commit bodily harm. Now that's a felony in the 2nd degree with a potential of 20 years in the state penitentiary. Why weren't those charges considered by a grand jury against these policemen?
It's a good question. It is a very good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I can tell you this, Vivian. The reason I asked the question about assault, when you mentioned violation of civil rights, and which they were found no bill, and violation of, what was the other one?
Official oppression. And let me tell you something else that favoritism came with the officers. There is a public system, the Justice Information Management System, that you can look cases up on. I looked the case up, like if it's Vivian King or Dwight Boykins, you would see our name. Just put a name search in. They don't have the officers' names. They might have just the first initial. And then on Chris Daniels' website, who is our district clerk, the keeper of records, everybody's indictments are on there. You look on Chris Daniels' website, you go to their case number, theirs are not there. So they're not
really?
letting you see. I mean, you can have an indictment without someone's address, although it's usually there. But they're getting preferential treatment even on the fact that their indictments are not public record.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that situation where the indictment is not public record?
Again, from a grand jury perspective, once it leaves the grand jury room, we don't really keep up with it. But when you mentioned about the no bill on a violation of the civil rights, but they were true bill on the oppression?
Official oppression.
Okay, which dealt with a person's rights.
Right, right.
What's the difference between that and civil rights?
There is a difference between them. Let me tell you what he was indicted for. When you talk about official oppression, it says a public servant commits an offense if, with intent to obtain a benefit or with intent to harm or defraud another, he intentionally, unknowingly, 1, violates a law relating to the public servant's office or employment. That's one way, so that could be like stealing something. Misuses government property, services, personal, or any other thing of value belonging to the government that has come into the public servant's custody. So that could be just, you know, whatever. And then they talk about it's a Class A misdemeanor. So it's basically just violating somebody's rights. I mean, it's a general catch-all, basically.
My question is, first of all, as you said, the gentleman, I mean, the young man, I mean, what he did was wrong. Let's start with that.
But he did get hit by a car.
That's right.
He surrendered and put his hands
I want to
up.
be clear. What he did was wrong.
Right.
It was an African-American woman. He violated her privacy. Okay. That's his charge.
Right.
But to get hit, so he could be charged for that.
And he was, and he pled guilty, and he got punished for it.
Paid the price. And this guy hits him with a car. Videotape very clear, which grand jurors and petty jurors typically don't get.
Right.
Showing, it wasn't his word against the defendant, showing him stomping this man with his hands behind his head.
Right.
And they find him. I have a question. You're a defendant. I mean, you're a defense lawyer, Vivian.
Right.
Who was his defense lawyer? And the reason I ask that question is, when that person, and you explain the process, when y'all select jurors, he or she had an opportunity to pick and diversify that jury.
And it's my understanding that they did it like a capital murder. They had jury questionnaires. They brought each juror in individually, prospective jurors, and had a pool to choose from, which included only 2 blacks. And it's my understanding that the defense lawyer DeGarian and his team struck the 2 blacks from the jury. The next step, though, should have been that the prosecution filed a Batson challenge, and a Batson challenge is Batson versus Kentucky. It's a United States Supreme Court case that says that all blacks have an equal protection right to be on this jury. They have a right to be there. Okay. Okay? And the prosecution didn't do that, it's my understanding. And so that is a problem because the prosecutor is supposed to not only be protecting Chad Holly's rights, but the rights of the prospective jurors.
Yeah.
And a lot of times defense lawyers file it, but either side can file it. And the remedy would be, if the judge found that they struck them just because they were black, to put them on the jury. That's the remedy. That's one of the remedies. The other one is to start over. But one of the most popular remedies is to put them on there. And then you would have more of a discussion of people's peers.
Yeah.
But I'm concerned tonight because I haven't gotten any calls tonight, so I'm wondering if the phone is working, because we always get a lot of calls. So I'm concerned about that. Give me a test call or something.
I'm also concerned about how the prosecutors strategized in the Chad Holly case. This is the case you were just discussing, where a number of police officers, I counted at least 5, between 5 and 8, that surrounded this young man after he had been hit by the car, while Chad Holly was on the ground. And they were beating him both with their feet as well as with their fists. And I'm concerned. Why did they try one of the officers who was only on the scene 4 seconds? Why didn't they try one of the other officers who was there longer and was beating more, you know, with what appeared to me stronger strokes? I mean, I'm just concerned about the whole strategy that the prosecutor took. And then also
Let me stop you for a moment. We're going to take a call. Caller, you're on. Thank you for calling.
Yes. I am disturbed because of the way that the jury held the case.
Please turn your radio down because we're getting your TV down because we're getting the static
Turn
on
the
it.
TV down. Turn TV down.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can absolutely hear you, but we just don't want to hear the background, the echo. Yes,
Okay. Yes, and I am real disturbed because it was visible that he is wrong, and then he go free.
Let me ask you this. If you were summoned to be on a jury, would you have gone down there to volunteer your time?
Every time I'm summoned, I go.
And let me tell you a trick question that prosecutors ask, which frustrates me, and that is a lot of times prosecutors will say, is there any reason why you can't serve on this jury for religious reasons that you can't stand in judgment of people? To me, that's a trick question geared toward minorities because a lot of black people, oh, I'm too religious, I can't stand in judgment of people. And I always object to that question because you're not standing in judgment of the person because the person might not even testify. You're standing in judgment of the facts. Sometimes people are not, you're not judging the person. Like if Dwight sees an accident, he's just going to talk about what he saw. It might not be accurate because it might have been his perspective. He might have been too far away to see it. So you're just talking about what's believable, what makes sense. A juror is putting together everybody's story to come up with the true story because everyone sees something from a different perspective. And so you're not judging the person, you're judging the facts. What those jurors had to do was judge what they saw on a video compared to what the officers said on their sworn statements. And they got fired because they made sworn statements. And this video came up over a year later and showed that they had lied on the documentation they had filed in what happened in the Chad Holly case. They would not have been prosecuted had this video not surfaced a long time after it happened. And that's when charges were actually filed. So do be clear about that. So I'm glad that, ma'am, that you're a person that would volunteer. Encourage the young people in your family to register to vote, to go down to jury duty, to participate, because we're leaving our community to people who don't care. And we have to care about our community and keep it safe from all people, including rogue cops. I have a lot of good friends that are police officers. My concern is that we let, a lot of us have different professions and we have jobs that we might get fired from. It might not be their calling. But we want the good cops to stay there, and we want the bad cops to be gotten rid of. Don't you agree?
Well, we have plenty of them out here where I am.
Where are you, ma'am?
I'm in what they call the bottom, in 3rd Ward. Do you know where the bottom is?
Yes, ma'am. I live in 3rd Ward.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, okay.
And
I live right off of Sampson on Anita, and we have cops that harass people all night long out here.
Well, they work for you, so you make sure you make the proper complaints to your city council person. Thank you for calling, and continue to watch Truth and Justice with Vivian King. Okay, Dwight, you have a comment?
Well, I mean, you asked a very important question, and I was glad to hear her say she serves. That's important. That Chad Holly, man, I mean, that's, I just can't understand, Vivian, how a defense lawyer and a prosecutor wouldn't look at that jury pool and not think about diversity of this city.
Well, I can see why a defense lawyer wouldn't want to have blacks on the jury because Chad Holly's black. And so, you know, my experience is that a white juror is going to look at a white defendant and see, this could be my son. This could be my nephew. I can't send him to prison. Even if he did wrong, he paid a lawyer, he's learned his lesson. But they don't look at, a white juror doesn't look at the black person like that.
Yeah.
They look at the black person as that's the guy I'm scared of. They don't give them that same second chance. Let me take another call. Caller, you're on. Make sure you turn your TV down, but thanks for calling.
Yes, how you doing, Vivian?
Hey, how are you? Who is this?
This is Joe Ballard.
Hey, Joe Ballard.
I voted for you today. I hope you win.
Thank you, baby.
Vote.
Thank you.
My concern is, Vivian, I went out when they had all this confusion going on because I was dealing with the guy the police shot in the back of the head, David Butler in 5th Ward. And I was arguing with the fact of, they talking about Chad Holly. If you look at that video real good, those other officers was beating the other kids too. Worse than they was beating Chad Holly.
Wow.
If you look at that video real good, you look at them when that officer ran from beating Chad Holly, they ran to snatch those other kids out the truck and beat those kids also. That's what kills me about these so-called activists. They focus on one issue that's hot. What about those other kids? Yeah, they was doing wrong. I didn't like it because when you're breaking somebody's house, it's like, you messing with their privacy. That's wrong. But the officers was wrong also.
Yeah.
And that's what officers are supposed to do. They're supposed to catch the bad guys. But they're not supposed to beat them.
But they should. If they wouldn't have had that tape.
Oh yeah, they wouldn't have even been prosecuted or fired.
We would have never knew about this here. But if you look at that tape real good, look how they did those other kids back behind that video.
Let me ask you this: are you able to serve on juries? Do you go into jury duty?
If I'm called, I will go. I vote. I urge everybody to vote. And you know what kills me? Another thing kills me when they have these block parties and these concerts. They'll break the door down, getting to them.
Yep.
But when it's time to go and vote and time to do stuff for your community, like the lady was saying in 3rd Ward, you got it in 5th Ward, you got it in Acres Home, you got it. We trash our neighborhoods up. We do all this here. We wear our pants down. We looking like fools. And then when the police do something to you, the first thing they want to say, it's the police fault.
Right. You're right. We have to take some personal responsibility.
It's our fault if we don't take responsibility for ourselves and we stop blaming everybody. It's our fault. We trash our neighborhoods up. We do this to our communities. We do this and that to our communities. And then the first time, you're going to find them not guilty.
Yeah, but we do need to go to jury duty and stay involved. And I appreciate your involvement and your watching
Joe.
the show. Joe, have you watched the show before?
I watch you all the time. Every time you go up, I vote for you. You represented my brother Keith Ballard a long time ago.
I know, and I got him off a long time ago. He's my dude. He was a good guy. He was facing federal life. So yeah, I did. And
this is what I do in the community. I try to enlighten.
What's your phone number, Joe?
281-850-0388.
All right, thanks for enlightening. We're gonna have to take another call, but thank you so much. Okay.
Just a point that Joe Ballard made that has been confirmed in my experience, and that is how police behave in general in the minority communities and low-income communities. It's not just a bunch of cops versus one kid. And he hit the nail right on the head, and pointing out that, hey, I mean, this is systemic. This is a disease that really reflects how the police, black, white, and Latino police, generally tend to do the bidding of the 1%. Tend to do the...
And it's our fault for allowing them to do that. Let me take another call. Caller, you're on. Turn your music down or turn the volume down, and thank you for calling me.
Okay, thank you.
Who is this?
My name is Carlos.
Hey, Carlos. Hey, Carlos. What's your comment tonight?
Well, I kind of want to talk about, well, first, I'm 35 years old. I've never been called for jury duty, but also as a kid, I was assaulted by police officers. Unfortunately, I never prosecuted or anything like that because my mom and everybody always said there's no point in it that...
You didn't even file a complaint? Your family didn't file a complaint?
No, because they always believed that the police officer would never be found guilty anyways. It was a waste of time, and that we would just suffer retaliation from the police department.
Do you have a driver's license?
I have an ID now.
Well, they do get people for jury duty based on their driver's license. I'm not sure if ID is extended to IDs, but it used to be a time that people were selected based on their voter ID, but that changed many years ago. They do it based on driver's license. So if you don't have a valid driver's license, that might be why you're not getting selected.
I used to have one. I haven't had one in probably like 4 years, 5 years.
All right, well, you better go pay those tickets and get your driver's license. We need you, Carlos. We need you.
Carlos, I got a question for you, and that is, how old were you at the time, and afterward, how did you feel with regard to just law enforcement in general? How old were you? Do you remember?
The first time I was attacked by the police officers, I was 12 years old. I was attacked by HPD. At the time, I really didn't fear the police department. I heard stories of friends being beat up and everything like that. And since then, I had grown angry towards the police department.
Now, we don't have much time, so I want to change the focus a little bit. What do you think about the grand jury process that we've talked about? Have you learned something tonight?
I did. I learned a little. I didn't know people could actually go and try to, sign up for it and everything like that. I thought it was just you were called on jury duty, and from there they decided if you're going to be grand jury or not.
No, grand jury is totally different. That's the 3 months, twice a week. Usually they're old, retired people that can give up, full days 2 times a week and for 3 months, because most people, young people, can't take off their jobs. Dwight Boykins can do it because he's a business owner, so he makes that personal sacrifice to get away from his business to do that. Most people are retired or they work in public relations or something at, like AT&T or some big company that, contributes their personnel to the community. But thank you for calling. If you don't have another comment about the grand jury, I'm going to let someone else call us in because we have 10 minutes. So anyway, do you have another I'm not going to be able to get into your other story, but do you have another grand jury thing that you can say to enlighten people?
Yes, and that is that how difficult it is from the perspective especially of black and Mexican and Latino and low-income white teenagers, especially male youth, how difficult it is from their perspective to get their voice heard when they've been on the receiving end of being assaulted by police officers, and how difficult it is to even think about reporting it. Our callers, have pointed this out, and it makes
I'm sorry, we have another call, and I'm trying to take them these last 10 minutes. Caller, you're on. Thank you for calling.
Hi, this is Victoria Rogers.
Hey, Victoria.
I'm very concerned with what happened today.
Yes, ma'am.
And I feel like it was very unjust, and the clergyman and everyone is trying to help. It was just an unjust thing they did to this young man today. I feel real sorry. I got tears in my eyes because we have to find a way to change the laws.
And one of the things we need to do, ma'am, is not change the laws, is participate in the process. Let me tell you this.
I work with civic clubs and different groups.
No, I know. I can tell you're actively involved. But how do we get, if 10,000 people would have been in front of that courthouse, say like an Al Sharpton march, those jurors would have had to come through that door. They would have had a different perspective. Houston has a lazy mentality when it comes to civil rights. You can't do this, and you can't do this in other cities, other major cities, because people are going to be thinking about, what are the people going to tear this town up if we don't see it the way it really is? But it's our fault in the black and Latino community because we're not civically engaged. If we are,
parents have to find a way to change our children's mind about when the police stopped you, he did what he's supposed to do. But the thing is, if you repeated doing things, you cause a lot of problems because you don't listen. And you have to change your mind. If it happened to me once with something, I got to do better and respect your parents and others better. It's not because what they did, only it was something we causes, but we going to have to change our mind as children and do and respect our neighborhood better.
Yes, ma'am, and I totally agree with you. I'm going to try to, we have 10 minutes. I want to take another call. Have you watched the show before, ma'am?
Oh, yeah, I watch you all the time.
Thank you, Victoria. I appreciate it, and thank you for working in the community. And you're welcome to call my office sometime, and we can just chit-chat, okay?
Okay.
You have any shows for me?
Keep praying for the pastors.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yes,
ma'am. Since we're rounding out of time, I want you to kind of wrap up a statement, because if another call comes in, I want to take it. Yeah. So everybody's going to have a wrap-up statement. I'm going to start with you, attorney.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I respectfully beg to differ. I do not believe that we have a lazy community in Houston at all. I believe we have a seriously intimidated community. I believe that the police...
But what would stop people from just standing in front of the courthouse and just saying, we want the right thing to happen? Because you don't know who people are doing that. I mean, why don't people protest like they did, say, like when Trayvon Martin, people came from all over the country, and Trayvon Martin, Zimmerman would have never been charged had people not gotten off their butts and gone and protested, because he wasn't charged at first. So maybe you misunderstood what I meant by lazy. I meant that we have 750 black people in here. We probably have 1 million Latinos. If you don't like something and you go stand around and protest something, people will listen to you.
Well,
And that's what I'm talking about, lazy. I'm just talking about what you can do for free. Let me take another call, please. Caller, you're on.
Yes, I'm calling to make a comment on that case. I'm thinking that many times I've gone to jury duty and they've never picked me. It seems that they have systemized to where they can eliminate many of the black people, because every time I've gone to jury duty, there's only 2 or 3 people out of the dozen or so that they selected that would be picked. And
Do you fall for the trick question of raising your hand and saying that you don't want to stand in judgment of someone? Do you ever fall for that trick question?
No. When I was there, they had a whole lot of other trick questions. You know, they wanted to ask me about O.J. Simpson, and I couldn't understand how that related to the case that they was getting ready to try.
Let me just tell you this. The key is, if this is your perspective, I can be fair and impartial.
Yeah.
Whatever the question is, I can be fair and impartial. Let me tell you something that frustrates me about black people is we're the most fair and impartial people there is. I mean, we will give everybody a benefit of doubt, forgiveness. I mean, we might find somebody guilty. We really put ourselves in the position of the defendant, whether the defendant is black, white, Hispanic, Asian, because we know on any given day that could be us. It doesn't matter if they look like you or look like him. We don't do it based on race. We do it based on the facts and the instructions that are given. So feel comfortable saying to every question, I can be fair and impartial. And then we can fight with the Batson challenge. Okay? Thank you for your call. We have 6 minutes, so I'm going to let you start.
Vivian, I just admire you. You're really. I like what you're doing. I really do, and I think what you're doing is bringing awareness to this process that's very important to our community, Latino community, and the county as a whole.
Because we need to all be engaged. White,
but Vivian,
black,
the question becomes, why is it just Vivian King? So
like I said, if I die tomorrow, I want my legacy to be that she cared. You know, I want to try to.
You do, Vivian.
And you know I care. You know me
you've
for
helped so
30-something
many
years.
people.
You know
do
me
it.
for years.
She's not free, but she will work with you.
I'm definitely not free.
Yeah, but Vivian,
my baby needs a new pair of shoes. Let me take one call and I'll let you wrap it up. Okay, let me take this call, please, sir.
Hi, Vivian.
Yes. Hey.
Hi, this is Carlos again. I called earlier.
Okay, Carlos.
I want to mention this city is not lazy. There is a lot of fear of retaliation. I was part of the Occupy movement. I was arrested also in D.C.
Okay.
We shut down K Street, and we had an outreach committee that would go out to different neighborhoods throughout the city, and
Now, I only meant lazy about getting in front of the courthouse protesting this one case that's going on, not Occupy movement. So I don't mean that to be across the board.
I'm not talking about Occupy movement. I'm talking about, from that experience, I realized a lot of people are scared of retaliation from HPD. There's a reason HPD is known as being the most police brutality in the country.
I accept that. I do agree with you that people are scared. But why are they so scared here and they're not scared in L.A. or Florida or different people? What's in New York? Tell me what the difference is in your perspective.
I mean, the difference here is, unfortunately, there's a lot of division within Houston that we have not known of unity within the community.
That's true.
I also work with Texas Organizing Project, and it's the same thing. We get out there, talk to these people. My aunt, Irma Capetillo, she's being harassed by HPD at the moment.
Has she made it? Make sure she makes a complaint.
And she filed a complaint, and now she's been pulled over, told that her tail light's out. They gave her a ticket for no insurance, even though she showed her insurance card. She got her insurance company on the phone.
Well, also have her call the FBI and the Department of Justice. The feds supervise the state police and the city police. So make sure she files a complaint in case something goes wrong, that she has a documented complaint with the FBI and the Department of Justice, okay? And you can do that. And we do need to stay engaged, and it's more of us than it is them. We want a fair, honest community, and we want our policemen to be accountable, not just for the bougie communities and the rich communities, but for the barrio, for 3rd Ward, for 5th Ward. We want it to be fair, and you young people have got to do something to change that. We have 3 minutes. I'm going to let my 2 guests wrap it up. And thank you, Carlos. Watch me next week. We'll try to do something else exciting.
Include Sunnyside in South Park too.
Okay, well, do
May
a
I say
minute,
thank you?
and then you do a minute. Do a
Well,
minute.
let me thank you again, Vivian, and it was an honor to be here. Truth and justice with Vivian King means a lot to our community, and I just think that what you're putting out front is important. People start talking about it, reevaluating if they've ever served on a jury, pettit or grand jury, and it's good to hear the Carlos, the Victoria, and the Joe talk about serving and wanting to serve. That's important. If I can make the commitment with all I have, I'm sure they can too. So I just want to thank you, thank the callers, and hopefully we can get more engaged as a community on the jury service.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for allowing not just the grand jury process, but also the judicial process in general to sort of be exposed a little bit more to the public scrutiny. And also I'd like to mention, please consider the fact that Houston is part of the Deep South. There's been hundreds of years of slavery preceding the 100 years of the black codes and color discrimination, and right now we're going through a new kind of racism, one that really is connected to, I believe, this deep recession, unemployment, and the fact that the 1% have stolen the future from our youth. And the courts and the police, I believe, are part and parcel of imposing and protecting the property of that 1%. That's my perspective. That's been my experience. And if you ever are in an altercation with a policeman, please remember this. Even if there's any kind of
1 minute, I have to wrap it up.
If there's any kind of interaction, you best believe that the policeman, if he's beaten you to a pulp, regardless of who's really the assailant, that policeman most likely will put false charges of felony assault against you. That has been many a scenario.
Yes, ma'am, it will be. Thank you so much for my guest, Dwight Boykins, 4-time grand juror. Thank you for serving in our community, being a community leader and concerned citizen. Thank you also for donating your time tonight and being so passionate about your position and sharing your 30 years of experience. I know we are going to collaborate again. You're going to bring, my normal format, as my callers know, is to have a defendant or an ex-con or somebody on here. So MariaElena has decided that she's going to bring one of her clients or former clients in, so we'll have another perspective. I like getting the Latino perspective. I am trying to be your voice. I am trying to educate you, because I care about my community in Houston. So please call again next week. Call in, watch, YouTube me. I've put some of the shows on YouTube, Vivian R. King. And if you have a show you want to tell me, call my office. You know you can Google me. And I want to be your voice and educate you about the criminal justice system. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you this time next week.